Hello everyone, my name is Nicole Fegan, and I watched 32 films in the past 3 months. I'm sitting here sweaty because I just spent 30 minutes filming a video talking about all of them, and then realized that that video was going to be like 45 minutes long. So I'm scrapping that, and now just talking about my favorite films that I watched in the last 3 months. If you want to see my thoughts on the others, the 2 stars through the 3.5 stars, I have a letterbox which I've linked in my description, so you can see my star ratings. You can also ask me about those in this. I just didn't want you guys to have to like sit through literally, I think it was gonna be like upwards of 45 minutes of me talking about movies that like I didn't even like that much. So instead, these are my 16 favorite films that I've watched in the past few months. So we're gonna start off with the 4-star bracket. My least favorite film I watched in the past few months is Chinatown. In this film, we're following a private investigator who is being tasked with investigating someone's affair, and through that he becomes entangled in this mess of like murder and politics and environmental issues and romance and all that jazz. I think this film is an excellent deconstruction of systems of power and wealth, and even like the film noir genre itself. It's very critical of itself and other films of its kind, and I think that all culminates in like this incredibly bleak ending where like the things you want to happen are not the things that happen. And I originally didn't like this film when I first watched it because of that. I was like really disheartened by the ending, but I think on a rewatch and getting to talk about it and getting to think about it, it just like really opened itself up, and I enjoyed it a lot more. Also, Jack Nicholson is the guy who plays a private investigator, and he's one of my favorite actors of all time. I think he plays this character as like so charismatic and slimy at the same time, and it just works so well. Up next we have Carol, and this is about a youngish department store worker who enters a relationship with a significantly older woman who is in a marriage that is not incredibly happy. I think the vibes and atmosphere of this film are incredible. I think each of the characters individually are so interesting. This was a film that like could have been a 4.5, but was kind of like knocked back a notch because I don't really think their relationship is incredibly healthy, which is totally fine, but I'm not sure the film itself knows this. I found myself at moments being kind of skeeved out by certain actions and not thinking that the film wanted me to be skeeved out, which created this like incredible distance between myself and the film. And I think this has like such a large cult following because like for a woman-woman relationship, like I think it is a pretty groundbreaking story because, spoiler alert, there's no like horrible death at the end. But at the same time, I wish that the film did a little bit more to tell me what it thought about itself. There's a scene like 3 scenes before the end that I love, and then I think the final scene is truly terrible. So that was kind of like left a sour taste in my mouth, but overall it's an amazing film and I really recommend it. Up next we have The Godfather. You've probably seen The Godfather. In this, we are following the Corleone family, specifically the youngest son, as his kind of ascent into being important in the family. This is truly as great as people say it is. I'm also watching The Sopranos right now, and like they're obviously different stories, but it was a nice little fun Venn diagram for me. I was also home in New York like right after watching this. I'm from Long Island, and so like different lives, but still it just like it all came together for me to really enjoy this watch. It's well acted, it's iconic and deservedly so, and I don't know how I haven't seen it yet, and if you haven't seen The Godfather, you gotta go see it, man. Next we have Andrei Rublev, and this is a long film following the painter Andrei Rublev in medieval Russia. This is a highly spiritual film that deals with artistry and painting and religion, and it is just like so visually stunning. I think the way it's told in installments works really well. You kind of like follow him and a few of his like companions through time, and like it really gives off this like epic, lush, giant story. You definitely need to set aside some time for this, but I really do think it's worth it. Next we have another medieval film, and that is The Seventh Seal. In this film, a man plays a game of chess with death. There are other things that happen, obviously, but like that's the central conceit of this film, and this is another one, black and white, gorgeous, like so pretty, and not in like the lush pretty colors, but just like the camera work is stunning. I wrote in my notes that it's expertly sparse when it needs to be and oddly full of life when it needs to be. There's this like central religious question of like the ability or inability to feel God that I think was really interesting, and I think the like central themes of this film could resonate in any era, but the medieval like backdrop for this, I think was especially just like a really good choice. I prefer Persona to this as far as Bergman goes, but this was awesome and it also really deserves its iconic status. Another incredibly long 4-star film is Jeanne Dielman, 23 Commerce Quai, 1080 Brussels. I may have pronounced that incorrectly at really any word. This is a film following the daily routine of a widowed housewife, as kind of she struggles to keep her routines afloat, and you really just watch her life. It's the wildest things about this film are the small things you end up noticing because its scope is so small. So like things like light flashing against a glass cabinet, I'm looking down at my notes, overcooked potatoes and buttons and a screaming baby, a pair of scissors. Just like all of these small things that make her routine stay afloat, and anything that, like, just the small things that create chaos. It's a very stressful film for something that like so little happens. Because of when the small things go awry, it's like very claustrophobic. There is a moment when potatoes get overcooked and it's just like, it's so depressing. This is one that really demands a lot of your attention. It's not one you can multitask with, and I kind of was multitasking while watching, so I probably will watch this again at some point in my life and maybe get more out of it. My final 4-star film of the past 3 months is 25th Hour, and in this we are following the last few hours, like the last day, of a convicted drug dealer before he goes off to prison. There are like a few central men, and all of them are like morally ubiquitous.
The word I was looking for was dubious. I am an idiot.
All of them kind of have guiltiness that is open-ended, some more so than others, but like I don't think any of them are definitively good or bad men, which I think is so interesting. This film also gets like post 9/11 New York very well. I was like, what, 3 or something when 9/11 happened, but like I am from New York, and so just like hearing about all that, it gets that atmosphere very right. Or so I can tell. We're up to the 4.5-star category, and starting this off, we'll keep this nice and sweet. We have How to Train Your Dragon, which I saw in theaters by myself. This is my favorite animated movie of all time. It has been since high school, not since I was a kid, since high school. This is about a Viking boy and like his village. Sorry, I can't believe I'm describing How to Train Your Dragon, this doesn't matter. But his village like kills dragons, but he befriends a dragon and trains one. I think it's very beautiful. I think the music is amazing. How to Train Your Dragon, great movie. Then we have The Thin Blue Line, which is a documentary about the murder of a police officer, and what made this so iconic is that it was one of the first films to do like dramatic reenactments of the event of like the documentary. And that was very controversial at the time, but like watching it now, and I feel like that's a pretty common thing to see, it really holds up. Like the reenactments are awesome, and the themes of this are so interesting and I think so relevant. It's just like a brilliant critique of like police culture and like police proceedings, and I am not a huge documentary person, as in I haven't seen a ton, and the ones I've seen don't always really connect with me, but this was awesome and I really recommend it. Then we have The Green Knight. The Green Knight came out this year. I saw it last night and it was so good. My boyfriend and I saw it together and like talked about it for like an hour over a Domino's pizza when we got home. This is about Sir Gawain and the story of the Green Knight. What happens is the Green Knight arrives on Christmas and challenges all of them to give him like a blow with his own axe, and that in 1 year's time he will return that blow. And so Gawain steps up, chops off his head, the Green Knight picks up his own head, leaves and says, "See me at the Green Chapel in a year." The cinematography was amazing. I think the story was both bold and subtle with all of its moves, and I think this just deals with the topics of, let's list them all, of like ambition and honor and masculinity, and this notion that like death and life are one and the same, and that death is coming for us all, so does it matter when it comes? Because like the Green Knight is kind of like this whole big metaphor for death, like the Green Knight is coming for all of us, and it's just like so good, both on like an entertainment value, because like there's a lot of characters and like you're mostly like following his voyage to the Green Knight is like, I feel like the second 2/3 of the film. And yet there's so much to think about. I feel like there are still parts of this film that I am parsing, but not in a way that I feel like I was confused while watching. There were certain like visual things, like there's a scene where he has to get something at the bottom of a lake, and like the things that are happening visually weren't like immediately obvious to me why they were happening, and I think that's because this is like a fantasy film, and I don't think all of its fantasy elements are exactly explained, but they also don't feel confusing, and I like that a lot. Like there's no one magic system, and yet sometimes things will happen and you just have to like accept them as true, and I loved it. Next, for someone who says I don't really watch a lot of documentaries, we have Gimme Shelter, and this was a documentary found footage film about the 1969 Rolling Stones concert in which someone was killed. At which someone was killed. This is the most stressful viewing experience probably of my entire life. It's like that and Uncut Gems right up there at the top. Because like you're watching, like there are like interviews with people after the fact, but a lot of the film is just raw footage from it happening, and you're straight up just like watching everyone react in real time. And like obviously that's just like, that doesn't have to do with filmmaking, that's just like good that someone got that on film. But what accompanies that, and like the interviews with the Rolling Stones and like the reactions after that, and it just feels like this document that captures the end of a movement. And it's so interesting on both like a historical side and also just like from a filmic perspective. It's really awesome, and you do not have to be a fan of the Rolling Stones to enjoy this, because I pretty much couldn't give a shit about the Rolling Stones except for a few songs, but this was amazing. Then next we have Casablanca. This was my first film back in theaters. My boyfriend and I went to see it together, and it was just an amazing first movie back at the movies. This is about a man who owns a nightclub in Morocco in the 1940s, and then out of all the gin joints in all the world, an old lover of his enters his nightclub. There's so much more to this movie than the romance. One of like my favorite things about movies from like all the film noirs is how well, like a good one at least, how well that blend of romance and politics happens, and this movie I think does that so well. It's both full of charm and like aesthetically gorgeous. I mean, like of course it's fun to see everyone like in their fancy gear smoking cigarettes inside. I'm sorry, shoot me, but I think that's fun to watch. So yeah, it's got the aesthetic, but I also just think it handles its romance and its characters and its politics so well. It's like so interesting that a movie from then can hold up at all politically. And it's not perfect, but it is such a well-made movie, and it's so engaging, and I absolutely loved it. Then next we have Brokeback Mountain, which I watched for the first time, and I didn't go in to this with like low expectations, but it like blew me away. This is about two men in the 60s who meet on a shepherding, like not trip, not assignment, job. They meet on a job, wow, and it blossoms into this friendship relationship, and they like this lifelong relationship, and they go on a trip back to the mountains every summer, and you're just kind of following their lives. I thought the acting was so good, the score was so good, I thought it was paced so well. Movies that like take place over a long span of time really have to do a lot of good work with the pacing, and I think this one, it just did this like really well. And like yeah, this movie is a tearjerker. It is very heart-wrenching to watch their dynamic because they're clearly in love and cannot be, or feel they cannot be. And I just think it handles that with a lot of tact and a lot of grace. I think this movie, like, I don't think people who've seen it actually think it's a joke, but like, my impression of this is that like people have been making jokes about this movie my whole life. And to actually watch it and see like such this tender and caring and well-constructed movie was just like, it felt really good, and this was amazing, and if you haven't seen this, I cannot recommend it enough. And then my final film of the 4.5 category, which could enter the 5-star category at one point in time if I see it again and love it as much as I did the first time, is Phantom Thread. In this movie we are following a renowned dressmaker who meets a woman who becomes his muse and his love as they have this fraught but intense relationship. This probably isn't Vogue to do, but I'm gonna read my own words because I think I wrote a pretty nice review for this. I said I feel positively haunted by this one. The slow, intimate piano score made me feel as if I was in the room with the whole film, complicit in every moral crime and every stolen glance. It's perhaps one of the most anxiety-inducing romance films I've ever seen, as if I, the viewer, do not wish to disturb the peace, so I too must remain still and silent. It looks beautiful and feels even more grand even in its smallest moments. It's really amazing. It is grand, it is magnificent, it is tense. And that's what I really like about it. It's not just a straight romance of any kind, but it's certainly not like a suspense movie. It's just tense, and I really love that about it. And now we have two 5-star films. One of them is a rewatch, and one of them I saw for the first time. And first, for the rewatch, we have 5 Easy Pieces. Whoo! 5 Easy Pieces, which I think I've talked about on this channel before when I watched it for the first time, is about a man from a wealthy California family who has left that family, not officially left, but he now works as a blue-collar oil worker some hours away from his family. Jack Nicholson plays the man in this, and again, I think he just does such a good job. He has so much charisma in this again, and he also has that certain kind of dirty sliminess. I think what really hit me this time are these questions of what right does this character have to do any of the things that he does? He kind of masquerades as a low-class man with all these other oil workers when he comes from this wealthy music-playing family. Oh, and the plot of the movie is that he has to go home because his father is sick. And so you see him with his workers and you also see him with his family, and maybe the most interesting thing is it doesn't feel like he fits in with either group. When I first watched this, it just really struck me that it seemed like this was a man who was running away from his, the wealthy elite. That he's from this, wealthy music-playing family, and he ran away from that. But I think what became clearer on this watch is that this is a man who runs away from everything. From women he's seeing and from any life that he has. He doesn't fit in anywhere, and he's willing to run away at any point. That's his defining characteristic thing. It's a movie, I think, that is about wealth, and about class, but also about the psychological element of just not... Hello, so my camera cut off before I could finish my thoughts on 5 Easy Pieces just because I was recording for so long today and my battery completely died. So what I was getting at is that I think this film is kind of about the psychological portrait of a man who can't stay anywhere for too long, and it's not that he is always wanting to go somewhere new, it's that he's always wanting to leave where he is. And I originally thought that this was a film about escaping wealth, who needs to be in this hoity-toity wealthy society when you could be elsewhere. But the reality of realizing that he actually leaves everywhere and every person he's ever been with or been to kind of changed the whole game for me. This is just one of my favorite films of all time now, and I cannot recommend it enough. And finally, my favorite film that I watched in the past 3 months is Close-Up. Alright, let's describe Close-Up. In the real world, in our real world, there was a man who was impersonating a director. He was tricking a family into thinking he was this director, and a different director found out about this, and then he filmed the trial of this man, as well as had the man and the family he was tricking recreate scenes from the past couple of weeks in which they met and slowly figured out that this man was was not the man he claimed to be, and that is the film. My favorite kind of literature is postmodern literature, or maybe, I don't know, I like both postmodernism and modernism, but I love the blending of fiction and reality. I think that is so brilliant when I see it in books like Pale Fire, in which there's a poem and footnotes and all that, and House of Leaves, and this is just the one film I've seen that I feel really does that blending expertly. I don't even know if I've seen other postmodern films. From a filmic perspective, it is brilliant because I think it interweaves those things so well. And then also on a human aspect, watching the footage of this trial and seeing this man who is not a bad man. He's doing this for the love of film, and hearing his explanations for why he did what he did is harrowing and beautiful and interesting all at once. It's both brilliant to watch, but then also brilliant to think about, think about what you're watching. And given that these are just normal people acting out their own lives, they do a really good job. And that titular close-up shot is of the trial, where you're just watching him speak. And it is so haunting, and just knowing that it's part documentary and part fiction, it all just creates this beautiful mosaic of film and life, and it was so good. Once again, my camera cut off before I had the opportunity to close out this video. So those are my favorite films that I watched in the months of May, June, and July. I really want to get back into making these monthly. I think it's more fun, and also I have time to actually, you know, like go into every single movie in depth. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you check any of these out, if you like any of these recommendations you have for me, and you will see me in the next video.